Hello, welcome to our worship facility webinar, Solving Worship Audio Challenges with Beam Steering, featuring Brandon Hines, Product Manager for Renkus-Heinz. Brandon, I know Renkus-Heinz has had a long history of helping churches with unique challenges with their audio challenges and problems. What do you think are the unique challenges facing houses of worship with their audio?
So there's a number of unique challenges that houses of worship deal with when thinking about audio reinforcement in these spaces. Oftentimes houses of worship are built to be visually impressive, stunning places in order to show our reverence for our divine. And that being so, these places are often very beautifully architected spaces. They're often full of hard reflective surfaces, and the combination of those two things yields some unique challenges when approaching sound system design in these spaces. And Renkus-Heinz, for a very long time, has had really the perfect tool to address these challenges with our beam steered loudspeakers. And there's a couple significant benefits that come along with these loudspeakers that make it so that they are not only a solution that addresses those challenges, but it's a solution that addresses those challenges and makes it a more efficient audio system overall in these types of spaces. And so the biggest and first and foremost is controlling the acoustics in these spaces that are often full of very hard reflective surfaces. And with the use of digitally beam steered loudspeakers, essentially what they allow you to do is put the sound on the audience without putting sound into the rest of the space. A, that makes the audio system more efficient with the energy it uses, and B, it reduces the amount of energy wasted into this space that would ultimately contribute to a higher reverberant level, higher noise floors, and that reduction in reverberant level, reduction in the amount of reflections in the space also gives you a higher direct to reverberant ratio, which means you have better clarity of spoken word, which yields higher speech intelligibility, and also better quality of your contemporary praise worship if you're in that type of a space, ultimately leading to a congregation that is better able to connect with the message and leave feeling more spiritually refreshed from these services than they would with a traditional sound system that might be putting audio all over the space and causing higher levels of reverberancy and noise floor.
Yeah, ideally, you want every person in that service to hear the exact level of sound as every other person. You don't want anyone to be straining to hear, but you don't want echo to be coming back. So yeah, the even coverage is what you're supposed to be looking for.
Correct. It's a combination of those two things, both evenness of coverage. Through the digital beam steering, we can make it so the person in the very front row has the exact same experience as the person in the back row. And also the way that steered sound systems work is they don't just make the front to back coverage good. Often the side to side coverage is significantly improved as well, because when the steering happens, all of the sound is steered down, not just the sound that's going straight out. So even people that are off to the sides of these loudspeakers have a significantly better experience than with a traditional either point source loudspeaker system or a traditional line array or column array style sound system.
Yep.
And in addition to those benefits of coverage, the loudspeakers often are significantly more discreet with a beam steered loudspeaker system as well. They hang directly on the wall, which means there's no complicated or expensive rigging hardware to utilize, and they tend to blend right into the building architecture. So you hear what you're supposed to hear without seeing big bulky loudspeakers. Again, which yields a situation where people are more immersed in the experience at hand rather than thinking about what the stuff is going on around the room, seeing the different loudspeakers. So they hear what they're supposed to hear without seeing anything more than the beautiful church that they find themselves in at any given moment.
I'm a big fan of your case studies over the years. They're amazing what you guys have done. And thinking of ornate historic churches where you've got the pillars and they might be different shades of marble or whatever. And I've seen cases where you've taken the narrow little column speakers and you've matched the color of the speaker to the exact tone of
Mm-hmm.
these pillars. So you could be looking right at it and you're like, There's something, oh my gosh, there's a speaker there, and
Yeah,
you wouldn't know unless you were looking for it. That's amazing work you guys do. Plus, you sit down and you can just hear the even tone, and it all blends into an experience where nothing stands out. You're just immersed in the worship experience, not in thinking about anything else. You're not pulled out of it due to
exactly.
it being a giant loudspeaker hanging above your head or on the wall or whatever. It's
Or even
that's
lots and lots of little loudspeakers all over the place. That can also be just as distracting as a bunch of big loudspeakers up in the front.
Yeah, yeah. You don't want to be pulled out of the majesty of the space you're in by seeing all these new 21st century things sitting there. You can look and appreciate the history and the culture and the worship experience without having to see everything else interrupting it visually or acoustically. You do a very nice job. I've always appreciated that.
Thank you very much, Gene. It's something that we strive to do, because respecting the architecture in these spaces is just as important as making sure that the people in the seats can hear exactly what they need to while they're worshiping.
Yeah. So the beam steering, we've established what it's supposed to do. How does it do what it's supposed to do?
Yeah, so I can go at this in a couple different ways. I'll start very basic, and then give a little bit more in depth. So for people that are a little bit more technically inclined, can get a little better understanding of what happens under the hood. But essentially, the way that beam steering works is you take this column loudspeaker that hangs directly on the wall, and you can think about the way that the sound comes out of the loudspeaker. It's like using a very tight flashlight in order to just skim the sound over the tops of people's heads, so it keeps all that sound directly directed at the people without putting sound elsewhere. And the way that that works is inside these columns of loudspeakers are lots of individual loudspeaker drivers, and each one of those drivers has its own amplifier and its own processor. And then through the processing, we adjust the time response, the frequency response, and the relative level of each of those little speaker drivers right next to each other. And through that processing, we are able to generate a coverage pattern that ultimately results in beautifully consistent front to back coverage, while also making sure that the people that are off axis on the sides of the loudspeakers are also getting covered by that same beautifully consistent sound, so that more people are covered by the same audio experience than would be possible with traditional loudspeaker systems. And that also allows you then to typically utilize fewer loudspeakers in your space. If you can cover the space from front to back, from side to side with a single loudspeaker, that is ultimately going to be better from an intelligibility standpoint and clarity standpoint, because the fewer sources in your space, the better that your intelligibility is going to be. But also that means it's going to be less expensive to install and less expensive to operate and maintain over the lifespan of the sound system. So there's lots and lots of benefits tied into these loudspeaker systems that go beyond just the coverage and directivity.
I've heard some statistics on just how tight you can get the coverage with this technology, where I think it was applied to a large space where the sound was even down to within a couple of inches. Is that something that we're achieving?
I wouldn't necessarily go as far as to say a couple inches, but definitely within a few degrees, depending on where the loudspeaker is. We have the ability to, through our steering, move where the beams go within tenths of a degree increment. And oftentimes, those little micro adjustments can make the difference between somebody in the back row hearing what needs to be heard and a reflection coming back from the back wall, and somebody in that back wall hearing what needs to be heard and a reflection not coming back off the back wall. So the amount of precision that can be involved with these loudspeaker systems is really pretty incredible. And ultimately, that's what enables us to deliver these experiences in these very challenging spaces.
Yeah, and that reflection and echo is something that applies to the more modern churches too. With
Mhm.
the historic churches, you've got the cathedrals and the places with the big open ceilings and echo bouncing all around, but you're not having to deal with a band. You might have an organ and a choir or something. With a more modern church, you might have a band.
Mhm.
And with that, you've got noise bouncing all around, and the audio engineer is going to try to do what they can do, but you have to use the loudspeakers to try to control that as well. So that it is a different kind of challenge that you have to handle differently, I'd assume.
Um, Maybe not necessarily differently, but just applying slightly different tools. Because at Renkus-Heinz we do have steerable loudspeaker systems that are designed primarily for spoken word, which you might find in these more traditional worship spaces in these more traditional larger cathedrals. But we also have digitally steered loudspeaker systems that are designed for full-blown rock and roll. So even in a modern contemporary church that's utilizing a full praise band, those spaces can tend to have a little bit better acoustics. But even with the better acoustics, if you have a loudspeaker system that's painting the entire room with audio, you are still going to get a dramatically better direct reverberant ratio with a loudspeaker system that is only putting energy where you need it, while still enabling you to have the sound pressure level and the clarity necessary to provide an experience for modern contemporary worship. So the benefits are it doesn't necessarily matter what space you're in. Applying this tool can give you dramatically better results as long as you're using, let's say, the right version of that tool.
Yeah, that brings up a good point again, where with a more modern church, you might have done engineering to that space to make it more acoustically to your liking. Where with a historic church, you can't change the space. As you said earlier, you don't want to change anything. It should look the same. So you're having to apply the technology to keep the space the same and just change where the sound is going.
Correct.
Yeah. What do you think are the latest advancements you've had in this area? And is there any particular case that presented challenges that you'd want to discuss that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah. So over the last, I'll say, 4 to 5 years or so, Renkus-Heinz has been putting a tremendous amount of effort into our software tools. And this is done for two primary reasons. One is a little bit more under the hood, but it is setting us up for future developments so we can start playing into, I will say, new dimensions of loudspeaker system technology. But the second and more primary reason is to make these loudspeaker systems more accessible to more users. Beam steered loudspeakers, be it Renkus-Heinz or other manufacturers, have had a perception in the market, over the last 20 years that we've been doing this, that they tend to be very time consuming or challenging to use or require a lot of knowledge in order to get good results from. And in the past, that may have been true. But with the latest advancements that we have released, specifically our new OmniBeam beam steering algorithm, which is a software tool that has at this point won many awards for its problem solving and its ability to allow users to get dramatically better results really within seconds. This tool is really trying to combat that perception by making it so that anybody can use these loudspeaker systems and cover their space with pristine, clear audio that doesn't excite the room, all while using a software that is easy to use, intuitive, and gives them results quickly. So this new OmniBeam, the process of steering your loudspeaker system is a matter of telling the software where your loudspeaker is, how high off the ground am I? And then where are the people in relation to that loudspeaker? You then click a button that we named Snap to Audience Area. The software then manipulates the aiming handles to put them at the front of the space and the back of the space. And in an instant, the software calculates the necessary FIR filter settings to deliver a coverage pattern that covers the space evenly from front to back with a nominally flat frequency response, making sure that everybody within that coverage window is getting the same experience all with very, very little effort. And we have been using this now for a few years, and the reception has been really tremendous. Um, one case I can think of off the top of my head that was really exciting to hear is our factory rep up in Northern California, Layer 8. He has been with us for a long, long time. He has done some really prestigious churches up in Northern California. He had recently, after the launch of OmniBeam, walked into a space where it was a system that he did not design, but he was worried that, will I be able to do this? And then with OmniBeam, he was able to walk out of there in under 2 hours with a sound system that sounded absolutely glorious, had very high speech intelligibility and coverage that was better than he could have hoped for. And he
Oh,
ultimately said that if it wasn't for OmniBeam, I don't think I would have been able to do this. And
that's
so
fantastic.
we have been getting some wonderful feedback with this new software tool, and like I said earlier, it has set us up for future product development as well. And we're really excited about about OmniBeam, and B, about where we're going to be going in the next few years.
That's fantastic. Under 2 hours is amazing.
Yeah, it's the couple times that I have actually gone out to the field to be able to use it, I actually end up spending more time setting up my microphones than I do actually setting up the sound system, which is
Wow.
a tremendous difference from what it used to be in the past.
That's because that's not disruptive to your client either. They have busy schedules, everyone does. So, and lots of churches too, they have multi-purpose facilities. They've got something going on. If you can get in and out of there that fast and have everyone be happy, that's about as best as you could possibly hope for.
Yeah, no, it really does make a dramatic difference when people are using these sound systems, because it doesn't only help in the field once a loudspeaker system has been installed. It also helps in the planning phases. So when somebody is working on a new system design, that same benefit of time savings also translates into their modeling work, because it's ultimately the same process for modeling and planning a loudspeaker system as it is for installing it. So the time saving benefits happens at the planning phases and in the installation phases. And as you say, if you've got a church that is multi-purpose, you can use the time required to not just get, one particular configuration set up. You can get a handful of configurations set up within a very short amount of time, so you can then just quickly recall those depending on what the configuration of your space is. you know so it becomes a tool that is very good at saving people time, saving people money, ultimately allowing them to be more successful on their installations and deliver a higher quality product more consistently to their customers.
Well, thanks, Brandon. That's an amazing testimony. I think this is something people would really be interested in. If anyone would want more information on what Renkus-Heinz is doing with beam steering, please feel free to email me at glass@worshipfacility.com and I'll get you the answers. Or you should go to www.renkusheinz.com. That's www.renkus-heinz.com and get answers straight from the source. Thank you to Brandon Heinz, and thank you for attending.